the worst kind of failure is success without fulfillment.
Yeah, because it's just empty otherwise. But I suppose it's like that my head immediately goes to like success is like externally defined. Almost like society will tell me what they think is successful in terms of what I achieve. But fulfillment is an inner job, this inside job of what I find fulfilling might be completely different to you. And so I have to be in touch with myself and spend some time reflecting and thinking more deeply, not just kind of absorbing everything that society, early life experiences, social media tells me is successful. So I like it. It makes me think deeply about it.
I think I've taken stock of this quite more from the fact that I've heard you talk about this emptiness that an Olympian might feel at the top of the podium. You've actually had success, but you don't feel fulfilled. You feel kind of lost along the way. What do you see when you you speak to Olympians that kind of have an experience like that?
Yeah, I was it was when I first started out training to be a sports psychologist, like I look back and I guess I was quite naive, maybe like we all were when we were younger. I just thought I wanted to help athletes achieve their dreams. And I assumed that winning an Olympic gold medal, being frank, because that was what my dream was, really like properly projecting, was like, this is the dream, this is the path, and it would be a source of joy and happiness and like pride forevermore. This was 20 odd years ago. Um, and then when I started working in the field and was very privileged to kind of have those sorts of deep and meaningful conversations with athletes that had achieved the so-called dream, I learned so much from some of their reflections that actually when they stood on top of a podium with a shiny thing around their neck, not all of them felt the things I thought they might feel. Not all of them felt that sense of joy and pride and having loved the journey. A lot of them felt sort of relief, actually relief of like, almost thank God that's done, or thank God I got there. And I know how hard they worked. Like I'd seen how hard they'd had to commit to get to that point and to be in the mix of that kind of a performance when it really counted. And I was looking at thinking that's not okay. Like that's not okay to give that much to, some people say I make choices, some people say I make sacrifices. I don't know if it's semantics. I think it's probably there's a bit more depth to it than that. But I just really wanted more for the athletes that I was privileged to coach. I wanted them to be on a path that would give that sense of fulfillment. And fine if there's a temporary bit of relief, but then what comes after that? So quickly they were just resetting, moving the goalposts like to the next achievement. And there was a sense quite quickly I could hear that just it was like never enough. It was never enough. And so it looked to me like this was a fair while ago now. I don't think people were talking about it as much. I mean, I was employed by sports, and my job description was to help athletes have the best chance of medaling. And I remember talking with some of my employers, like, we need to broaden this definition because I'm not that motivated by that anymore. It has to be something deeper and more holistic and more meaningful, more fulfillment. Um, what was the original question?
Well, no, if your motivation had shifted, then how do you? Because an athlete's motivation and it really everyone's motivation will have this underlying idea of like success in an external validation metric. So how hard is that to be able to be from the outside to be able to tell someone where you're heading is a road to nowhere essentially, and how do you shift that perspective that you know to be true onto someone that is so within it and focused on that goal?
That's an amazing question. I'm definitely still figuring it out, like all of us. Um, But I think it's also, yeah, because what's important about that is that it's not, sometimes there's these extreme narratives of polarities of like, we're either after the win at all costs or we're after enjoying it and happy, like plucky losers kind of thing. And in neither of those things are what I think we're talking about here is like, I mean, I love to win. I love to see the teams I work with win. Like it is such a buzz and such a great challenge to try and create the conditions for that performance to happen. The ultimate dream would be that the athlete or the team is in a position to do the very best they can when it matters most, and it just so happens that their very best is the best. And like, so I'm about the win. I want that, but the way in which they win, or what does the win mean to them, is the bit that I just think we need to increasingly add to the narrative, which we are. Like, I think it is really shifting. But you're right. You have to be careful. I'm not standing there or sitting alongside someone as a psych and saying all the things you think are wrong, even though I sometimes may think that, because you have to walk alongside them and help them work it out for themselves. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I think there's a chance that could sound it. I don't mean it like that. It's more just really trying to see it through their eyes and give them a space to think about why they want to go on this journey and what do they think it will take and what do they think it will feel like when they get there. And so it's not me sort of telling them that that approach is wrong, but more giving them a space to reflect and take back their own mind, because so much of our thoughts throughout the day, throughout the week, the month and the year and so on are just conditioned. They're just automatic. So if they're not really yours, then how do you know that they're wise? So I think that's probably more the approach would be to give people a space to think a bit more deeply about what they're doing, because as far as we know, we have one life and it's precious. What do you want to use it for? Other than that, and it doesn't work for everyone. That's not the right approach for everyone. There are some athletes that I would quite quickly sense like, I'm just not the right person for you, and we need to find someone else who's got a different style, different approach. That's a good challenge to figure it out.
Yeah, I think even for myself, I had that thinking back to the road to being a professional athlete, and even having been a professional athlete. So turning pro in 2010, eventually retiring in 2016. But the real interesting thing was, and this comes on to the question, is how much of the idea of what success is lies at the feet of the individual or the external environment that's around them, whether it's the people they're surrounded with or even a larger, wider societal question. Where do you find that the majority of that idea of success lies from? Where's it falling at the feet of?
Where work is needed to be done, which is, in my experience, 99% of cases, is it's been inherited from misunderstandings in early life. So I think really, I know that some people get a bit nervous of like, oh, don't make me talk about my childhood, but actually it's really profound in how it shapes the beliefs you have about yourself, other people, the world, how you define success. And I'm a real nerd for it, of like learning how the brain evolves and learning what kind of a brain do we have when we're young. I'm talking like 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, even my eldest Isla, she's 5, and like she comes out of school and she immediately like thrusts her drawings in my face, like, look, mommy, look what I did. She wants me to be so impressed by something she's produced and created. And it's so tempting to just like look at it and be like, wow, like, oh, this is really cool. Even though I think it's like, it's like a bit naff. I'd be like, oh, really? But actually just have a more honest conversation with her about it, because I'm not wanting to conflate her self-esteem and her self-worth with the things that she achieves. I want those two things to be separate, so we can have a robust conversation about this piece of artwork that, like, I know you can do better coloring than that, kiddo. But I love you so much, or Anna, I love you so much. Those two things are they get so confused because kids have such egocentric brains, because they have such incomplete brains, that they merge things that should never be merged, like achievement and self-worth. And so I think if we can give people some insight, and again, like, not some of my athletes are amazing and they're humoring me around, like, let's properly go to school here, like, let's learn about how the brain is evolved, let's learn about what life might have been like for you. And somebody said to me recently, I know that my dad loves me so much, but I could also notice that when I won in this guy's particular sport, my dad just gave me a slightly tighter hug. The squeeze was just a bit tighter. And it's like, and what meaning did your young, incomplete, beautiful, messy brain give to that? Was that he loved me more when I won. Whereas if you could freeze frame and go back to that moment and say, hey, like, most parents would say there's nothing my kid can do to make me love them any more or less. There might be things I can do that will make me like them some more or less, with a little terrors, but like, it's so many. I find it really humbling to look at how many misunderstandings evolve from those early years.
Have you read Steve Peters' Chin Paradox?
Yeah, and Steve was he had a profound effect on my career. I was so fortunate that in my first job in elite sport, he was my mentor. So he mentored
Wow.
me for like almost 6 years, and I was watching him on the BBC program the other day, and it's quite. I love hearing this. Like, his voice he's got a particular approach. It's not for everyone. I personally didn't want to just stick with the chimp model. I think it's really important to diversify, and for me, is like not to lead with a model, but to lead with the relationship. But I learned so much from him about how the brain works, how we distill it down. And you'll probably think about his fridge door syndrome.
Yeah, 100%. The gremlins, as he describes them. And I had been having this conversation with someone recently about what he describes as gremlins being these sort of hardwired belief systems that are they're formed between the ages of 1 and 7.
Yeah.
And then when you get to 7, your brain is hardwiring into sort of how you value the world. And I remember when I first read that fridge door syndrome and the idea of gremlins being sort of built into your brain, this idea of how you see your value in the world and sometimes whether it's what you create. So people that are listening that don't understand what we're talking about, it is Dr. Steve Peters put forward this idea of gremlins. He just simplified it into this idea of gremlins. And the story was a child comes to the parent with a painting exactly as you're talking about and says, look, I've created a painting. The parent looks at it and goes, wow, this is amazing, puts it on the fridge. Let's show everyone how well it is, how good it is. Second scenario, kid comes back from school, gives the painting, the mum puts it to the side, grabs the kid, hugs them, and says, you're amazing for putting the effort in to do that. Let's have a look at this painting. Wow, do you want to put it on the fridge? Yes, amazing. First scenario, the kid is believing that what they create is their value. The second is that the child is valuable as they are, and then just as a byproduct of their effort, what they do, they have created something. And I had been talking to people about that because I was the first child. And I think a lot of athletes are the
Yeah,
first child.
100%.
We're majority of that. My curiosity around that then moved to, what do you believe it takes to change those gremlins, change those hardwired values of I see the world as the only way I'm valued is by what I create and the success I can gain through what I'm creating.
And, Steve and I used to have really good debates about this, like, because I'm an optimist, and he might say, "Katie, you're being naive." It's like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna stick with my optimism because I think if you believe those things can't be changed, then you won't try hard enough to even find out." And I can't tell you how much respect I have for Steve Peters and how much I learned from him, but I also disagree with him on it. Is like, do you know what? I think, because I have seen it. I have seen it. It's hard, takes a lot of commitment, but I think that there are so many different techniques and approaches you can take. Is that I would always start with that education piece, exactly like you talked about. Let's look at what might have happened here. And then there's so many different approaches. Like if we can go back to sort of those early years and almost through guided visualization, help people get into a pretty decent, like relaxed, really open state where they're able to reflect, bring back those memories and start to see life through the eyes of 5-year-old you or 6-year-old you. Often you get them to bring photographs in of that time of their life to really bring it to life of what did it feel like back then? How did you see the world? Like a really kind of really revisit it and then start to reprogram it of like, what if we could go back there and talk to younger Lewis, what would we need to say to him? What does he need to hear? What do we need to clarify about that moment of misunderstanding? And part of that is almost like never any judgment on the parent. Is like all parents are doing the best they can with the skills they have, give or take. But the truth is, like, it is the most mind-blowingly difficult job with the least amount of training. And so, like, I think most parents are slightly messing it up, as myself as well. Like, when Isla comes back, like, it is so tempting to just celebrate the achievement. And interestingly, and honoring everything I learned from Steve, I say to her, "Do you want to put it on the fridge?" And most often she says no. She's like, "No, not really." And then we can have a better conversation. I was like, "Oh, which bit do you like the most?" Rather than me lead with telling you what I think is the best so that you always then need to orientate to what other people think and try and please other people. Which bit do you like the most? And it amazes me because she will have an opinion. If I didn't ask that question, I'd never even find it out. So I think, sorry, I'm diverting from the question. I think you can change it. Takes a lot of commitment, and then put in more skills in the moment. Whether some psychologists will talk about acceptance and commitment therapy, some CBT. There's loads of different things you can try to find the right approach for the individual that's sitting with you, um, and it's worth it because the freedom that comes from that second picture that you created. Then they can get in touch and think, what do I care about in life? How do I define success? And you can have way more robust conversations about performance, whether it's an art drawing or, cricket, purport, whatever it might be, because you haven't conflated the identity with the self-worth, with the achievement, sorry.
I found mindfulness to be a huge impact on this one. Once I started a meditation practice and the ability to just understand thoughts, patterns, and behaviors that were sort of becoming habitual, you're able to, way I describe it, is put a spanner in the spokes of the turning wheel that can just roll down the hill. And what I was describing it to someone was, if you say a pattern of behavior that you have that you've probably built in, let's say it's been built into you, is to be selfish. That you're instinctively selfish, but then you go through the process of knowing that you are selfish and you've become aware of it, that once you've started to practice that mindful approach of catching that thought and maybe the intention to be selfish, and then stopped it and then chosen to do the non-selfish thing and the selfless thing, it it's not the judgment of having that selfish thought, but it's actually the output that is the most important thing, right? Because you could be mindless in that moment. You could have the selfish thought, run with it, and just be selfish. But if you catch yourself and go, "Oh, I was about to be a selfish prick, and no, that's not how I want to be, and I want to do this." It's the same way, I think, of I'm about to have success and I'm about to value this achievement and go, "Oh, isn't that the best thing?" Well, hold on, no, it's not the best thing. It's not be all and end all. Actually, I value the effort that I've put in, the person I am, the character that I've gone for, and then that being the output that you get. I think sometimes people might judge themselves too much on the pre-programming they've got and say, because I am thinking this, I'm a bad person because I've just not got rid of it. And I don't think you're going to get rid of it, but I think your optimistic approach and what you're talking about, that you're not going to get rid of it, you're just going to have to navigate it and move it onto the path that you want to go to. Yeah.
And then you get to like, what is the real me? That's someone asked me that recently, and my head exploded. Like, how on earth do we explain this together? Like, who are you? Like, and if I don't know what exactly is the truth, but if we have like 60,000 thoughts per day on average, how many of those are mine? How many of those are just conditioned? How many of those are social media driven? How many of those are just a product of me being hungry and a bit grumpy? Like, what is it to be human? Is a pretty mind-boggling question that is just so much fun to explore with people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, have you heard of the film Jim and Andy with Jim Carrey? I really encourage you to watch it. I encourage so many people to watch it. It's just such a very interesting film. It was about Jim Carrey when he played Andy Kaufman on a film called Man on the Moon. And it was a very transformative moment, and it was hidden. The footage, the behind the scenes footage, was hidden from the world for 20 years because Universal, who had a contract, I think had a contract over Jim Carrey, didn't want the footage to come out because they didn't want to let the world know that Jim Carrey was an asshole. And it wasn't okay. It was the fact that what he did in this film was just crazy, and it wasn't the fact that he wasn't. It was what he did in this film. And Andy Kaufman was one of his heroes. But the whole film is about transforming and really diving into, who am I? Who is Jim
Wow.
Carrey?
Okay.
But who are we as individuals?
Yeah.
And there's this line that he says in it that sticks with me forever, that he says, "You can take a chance on being loved or hated for who you really are, or go to your grave holding onto a character that you never were."
Ugh. Yeah.
And I think we sometimes do that. And I recently had said in a previous podcast that actually I do feel there's an element of, if we're trying to figure out who we are, what it is that we want to achieve, what we're driven by, understand ourselves more, we do have to spend a lot of time, or at least some time, being the person that we don't want to be.
Yeah. To
To
figure it
understand
out.
how,
Yeah.
to understand
Yeah.
how that doesn't feel
Experiment.
comfortable,
Mhm.
and then eventually go, wow, this is a character that I'm playing and it's not me, it's not original. And I find out when you hit your 30s, that eventually starts to become the more existential questions you're asking in life. But I think there is a time period where you can say to someone fairly young, you're going to spend some time being someone you're not proud of, or do some decisions and make decisions that you're not proud of. But in that, you'll learn a lot more about who you are, what you think, the success you want, what you define it as, and where you want to go.
And then it'll be way more meaningful because you've been on that journey and because you've owned it and figured it out, rather than someone telling you as well. Like, you can't accelerate it, the speed of it, because I think, yeah, you have to meet people where they are, try and give them experiences and opportunities to figure out their path. Is, yeah, such a privilege. That's an amazing quote. I love that. Mm.
How do we balance winning and finding fulfillment? But probably in that, how do we redefine our version of success?
Yeah. The we were talking quite a bit a moment ago about early life experiences, as shaping part of why that becomes an issue and why that's difficult. I do think we need to, and I think everybody knows it intuitively, look at it's not just that, though. It's the way society behaves. I don't know who society is necessarily, but I've noticed that if an athlete comes back with a medal, a championship, a trophy, etc., then they get loads of media invites and people invite them into businesses to talk and schools to talk and all this sort of stuff. And if they finish 4th, 5th or 6th, the phone's quiet. And even if when they're going out for a coffee in the morning, people will approach them if they've done well and not. So there's so many cues that lead to further misunderstandings around the achievement versus fulfillment piece. No one says, wow, what was that experience like for you? They're just assuming that if you won or finished on a podium or whatever it might be, then it will be successful. It will be meaningful, sorry. So I think having a really compassionate view on the fact that to some degree, I think we're always going to wrestle with this. And we have to choose then, if you want to be in this territory, if you want to play in this field of performance sport or performance in any domain, whether it's the military, music, etc., then you have to take responsibility for how you want to experience it. I I realize some of my athletes have apparently take a sweepstake in group sessions of how long will it take into the session for me to talk about death. Because I was like, oh, this is a bit. But and then I was reflecting on what that's about. I think actually one of them you might have interviewed. Did you interview Sam Ward?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a complete terror for this as well. He's literally sweepstakes beforehand of because I think, I don't mean it in a negative way. I'm sure it's probably obvious and you probably immediately think the same as if we accept that life is finite, which most people don't want to think about death because it's so scary or so sad. But if we live our life with a greater recognition that it's finite, I think it makes us take more responsibility and ownership over the day to day. There's that book, haven't read it in a long time, Bronnie Ware's book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And that does offer us an opportunity to transform our lived experience day to day by looking at what do people say when they're at the end of their life. And at the early stage in life, you're thinking about your CV, you're thinking about what you want to achieve, what looks good, promotions and so on. And then something happens, I don't know when it is exactly, but people start to then reflect more on the eulogy piece of what do I want people to say at the end of my life, of actually what's important, what really mattered. And that sense of just continually trying to take back ownership over my life, of who I am as a person, of how I define success, doesn't mean I don't still want to win, but the reason why I want to win changes. The meaning of the win changes. So I still want to help the teams and athletes that I work with to achieve whatever it is they consider to be, special, whether it's making the Lions squad, whether it's winning the Premiership, whatever it might be. But just really being disciplined to think about why, and coming from a point of enoughness. I don't know what the right word for it is. That sense of I am enough as I am, and I want to achieve great things is transformational.
I had something similar that I listened to a meditation or sort of monologue from Sam Harris. And
should I know who Sam Harris is? I probably should.
Sam Harris is a neuroscientist,
Okay.
mindfulness teacher, philosopher. In my opinion, one of the greatest minds that we have current in the modern world, and incredibly profound at articulating it. But he, on his app, put a sort of a monologue about the last time. And I converted this into a piece, especially based around sport, because when I listened to it, it completely changed my perspective on the sort of the day-to-day, and as well as the sports and the activities that you do, that sometimes you can start to feel resentful or regret. And it's really interesting right now because I've gone into my last year of playing cricket. I've decided I'm stepping away from the sport. And even on Saturday, I was playing at a ground that I'd played since I was a kid. It was a away fixture. I'd been there so many times. And I walked onto the field going, no matter how well I do here, this will be the last time I play here. This will be the last time I set foot onto this grass. But the monologue that he spoke about was this idea that there will always be a last time. And he even used the idea of when your child is screaming in the middle of the night as a baby, he said there will eventually be a last time.
Do you promise? Yeah.
But there will be, right?
And you'll never know when that is.
Yeah, and he talks about his daughter misspeaking the word animals and saying aminals. He said, I'm not going to correct her because there will be a time where she will say it for the last time and it's cute and it's amazing. So I would never stop her from saying it. But then it really just made me reflect on these moments where we sometimes in sport and elite environments and high performing environments, we can get so drawn into the fact that this is monotonous. I'm doing this again and again. And I actually think back to the 7th of July 2016 when I walked out onto that field with the Sussex shirt on. I didn't know that was the last time I would ever wear that shirt. And I wondered if I had a perspective of it could have been, would I've been out there differently? Would I've seen the game differently? And I think of that in every person that's doing something towards some sort of goal and ambition, that having this perspective of this could be the last time, and also mixed in with this element of there are billions of people in the world right now that, given the chance to snap their fingers, would be in your shoes right now if they could. And I think it's so important to have these moments where you do try to remind yourself that, because the monotony, the stress, the pressure continuously can just be overwhelming, and you can just get caught up in it, and then you lose the meaning within it. It instantly brings meaning to what you're
I
doing.
think that's so powerful what you just described, and there's so much in it that first of all, I was, like, gonna ask you about how you're feeling about stepping away, but I don't know. Is that okay? Yeah.
So now I am at the stage where the reasons why I was playing, and this is interesting having been at the very top of my sport, is that I played that sport to be ambitious, to succeed, to grow myself as a player, to have success out on a bigger stage. Once that was ripped away from me through injury, all of the meaning changed.
Mm.
The meaning for me became about connection with friends. I play with my brother, so family is there, and it was like being a kid again. And I did it all pretty much based on it being knowing I needed human connection on a weekend. I wanted a social element to my life. And that has now changed this year. Those guys have got families. It's changing. They're moving away from the sport. They're growing up. They're getting out of it. And my goalposts had shifted. I have met someone. My goalposts have shifted. I have other things that I'm ambitious for. And it's this tussle between, I no longer have this goal that I can seek within the sport. So I'm an ambitious person. I want to be moving forward. I have the social element that's gone. So that is a huge element that's changed. My body is also just screaming at me, just saying, what, we're not built for doing this anymore. And I don't have anything else to prove. I don't have anything else to prove in the sport. I've done what I needed to do. I also don't want to be a roadblock for potentially a 14, 15-year-old Lewis who really wants to have that journey. And I don't want to be in their way. I want to be someone that can be right behind them going, I've got your back, go for it, mate. And it just culminated with all of that, created a much comfortable feel of going and being done.
That sounds really peaceful. It's
It is, yeah.
amazing to hear the intentionality and the reflectiveness, and you'd wish that for so many athletes that I know. It's the same, like, that same philosophy that so many athletes say to me, like, it's very rarely do you get to choose when you finish. Often it would be like deselection or injury, loss of form, and so on. And there's something really empowering about being able to recognize where you're at, what's changed, and also know that there's great stuff to come still. This is a
I
chapter.
personally feel that a lot of it is down to my meditation mindfulness practice, through the fact that I've been able to understand my ego a lot more. Because if I think about it, the only reason why I would stay in it would be to feed my ego of like, there's more for me to do, there's more for me to do. And then I think about it again, if you are an elite athlete, the reason why the scary approach to maybe your career ending tomorrow or you being dropped and deselected is this feeling of your ego being damaged and that I'm not enough without this. And therefore I need it in order to stay alive. But the worry becomes is the longer you stay in it, the more you feed that ego, the more you're just completely reinforcing this idea that
100%.
you are defined around this. Your success is built. You as a human being, your success, your value is built around that. And if you haven't done the work on that ego to know that if tomorrow or now I step away, I'm good.
Yeah. And this is what I find so amazing about the mind, though, that in just what you've just shared, there's so many little, and tricks is the wrong word because that almost feels like it cheapens it, but there's so many things you can do with your mind to change your life. And even just the point you made about like, the mindset of it, I don't know if this will be my last one. Like there's a rugby player that has a similar kind of like trick or stance. He's had a lot of injuries and he's like, this could be my last game. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to play free. I'm going to be fully committed. I'm not going to freak out about mistakes and so on. And it's only through adversity that he's been gifted. Well, adversity and reflection that he's like you, he's thought deeply about what it means. And now he's found a way to perform consistently, which without that adversity, he may not have done it. It's interesting to think how we can help athletes to find those kind of powerful mind maneuvers without having to always have the adversity piece. That you never know when your last game is going to be, your last training session, the last time you have a laugh with your teammates. That is such a powerful mindset that you describe. But I was also reflecting on, it's so hard to there's a lot of almost acceptance. You haven't used the word acceptance, but there's a lot of acceptance in what you're talking about there, about accepting that this is where I am, or this is where the performance is, or this is what. And yet that's so almost like counter to the mindset of most elite athletes of like being dissatisfied with the reality of wanting to get better, improve. And I find that really a fun place to try and be with people of how can we bring the benefits of acceptance. This is who I am, this is where I am, or this is this mistake that happened, or this is this moment that I misread, and I want to get better and learn from it, but not have that be aggy, not have that be like constantly like a source of distress, but more curiosity of like,
Mm.
let's see what's possible.
I think acceptance is an incredible superpower that is underrated in high performance. The reason I say that is because you're talking on a bigger scale. There's this idea of acceptance of I am who I am, I'm in the situation I'm in. But on kind of a micro scale is the sort of game by game, moment by moment acceptance of a situation, whether it's in a sport, in a organization, of what's happening at that moment. The more I see high performers wrestling with the scenario, the situation that it's, the reality of the situation and not being able to accept it, the less they can do in it because they can't, or they disengage. They go, this is not for me. I can't do this. I'm no longer able to do it. This is not my day. I can't figure it out. And the adaptability just gets pushed aside straight away. So the ability to accept this pitch, this condition, this weather, this decision is all just happening and I have to accept it. And it's really after that, what do I do next? And I think if people can unlock that, they will change not only their ability to perform, but their perspective of themselves and how they see the performance.
There's an athlete that I worked with a long time ago now in the run up to the London Olympics. He with his teammate Tim Bailey in the sport of canoe slalom became the first at the GB Olympic champions. And he's a magnificent individual. He's so funny, challenging. Like I learned so much working with him. One of my most like joyful moments where I heard a journalist say to him like, "How did you handle the pressure on the start line? Like, it was a real cauldron. Like the crowd were all wrapped around the course at Lee Valley in London at the Olympics." And he's like, "How did you handle that pressure?" And he was like, "I didn't really feel pressure. I just saw an opportunity, and I couldn't wait to try and solve the challenges that the course design was presenting me." And he was like so absorbed in the mastery moment, almost like, of course there's a part like of course, like they were desperate to push for a medal, like they'd missed the Beijing Olympics through various difficult circumstances. But what an unbelievable mindset of like, here's an opportunity and a fun challenge, a puzzle that I'm going to try and solve. Oh, and it just so happens we've put down a run that was the best in the world on this day. Here's a gold medal. So it's like, it's almost like a consequence of just being absorbed in something that he found fascinating. Still to this day, that was like over 10 years ago, and I still think about that now.
Yeah, that puzzle solving mentality, I'm a big fan of that. Just in the sense that cricket as a sport, I will always describe this to cricketers that are trying to become professionals or are professionals, is pretty much boil it down to your job on the day is to solve a puzzle that is changed from the last day because it's a 4-day. It might be a 4-day game or it's a brand new environment. the conditions you're in will never be the same as they are right now, and they will be changing day by day, and you will always turn up to a ground where the pitch is different, the opposition are different, the conditions out, the environment is different, and it's a very unique and nuanced sport in that sense, because a football pitch is always a football pitch, right? And you have to deal with just the players on it. Maybe you have to deal with wind, rain,
They met,
sleet,
yeah,
snow,
no, I think they made
but the
something.
actual, imagine if the pitch in football changed to rock hard and the ball reacted differently off it, and but that's a reality in something like cricket. And so I always say you have to turn up with this puzzle solving mentality, that you want to try and solve this puzzle, but also for your own personal perspective, you might have to solve that puzzle with one arm tied behind your back. For example, you have to change, the tools might change on the day. You might be slightly sorer
That's a
this
nice
day. You
angle.
might be
Yeah.
slightly agitated. Someone might have pissed you off in the morning, right? So you're going to have to adapt with, ultimately turn up, assess, where am I at? What do I have today? What tools do I have? And what does the puzzle need from me today? And how do I fit that into it? I think where people fall down is where they get frustrated in their performances because they're met with a challenge and an environment and something that's uncontrollable. And they go, this doesn't fit into the perfect version of me. My best version is unable to perform today. What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's so interesting that the more identified you are with the sport or the outcome, the more personal it is, which in so many ways is an asset, because then those are the athletes, I'd say, that work harder, that are more resilient in the pathway to, towards high performance. But then when it really matters, that what was an asset becomes a liability in what I've noticed of, like, then because I care so much, when it's not fair, like when there's something that is happening that shouldn't be happening, you get even more internal resistance that then distracts you from actually working out what is the next move, how do I solve the puzzle. So I think it's really interesting. It's so hard for athletes of, how do you want to care about this moment? You're coming back to, it feels like in this conversation all roads lead back to meaning, like what is the meaning you want to assign to this moment? Because if it's like your whole, yeah, oops, yeah, we're back with self-esteem or with self-worth. If my whole self-worth is contingent on winning this game, but this ref or this umpire is calling things wrong, I'm so caught up now with how unfair that is and how invested I am in this moment that I'm now going to underperform. I've got so much interference, but actually taking back some control, you had way more power in that moment than you realized, to accept what is happening and adapt. And that's the part. And then the other bit, like, then the sense of, like, the compassion of, am I okay to say I'm doing the best I can with the skills I have right now? And I know I'm going to do that because of how I prepared, or the kind of person I am, where my values are. So whatever the outcome is, I'm going to find some win in that. And yeah, I'm going to make my best better, yes, through reflecting and all the rest of it. But right here and now, I'm at peace enough with myself and who I am in the world to be able to accept however this unfolds. And the freedom that comes from that then loads the dice in favor of something quite special happening anyway. But all these things are not naturally how the mind works. It's not a natural way of thinking or being.
Yeah, my thinking is that it's a constant battle between this sort of internal way of thinking and being that you want to have, and then a forever fight against the external, whether it's the environment you're in, society, your preconceived ideas, and you're just constantly at battle with it. How do you think people begin to wrestle more of that back into themselves and really hone into that and try to drown out that noise on a more practical level?
Yeah. I'm quite again, this might sound a bit negative to begin with, but just really encouraging people to notice and stick with the suffering that is coming from not taking that approach. That look at what this is costing you in terms of falling short of your potential, being with more difficult emotions, a sense that, yeah, sense of regret and all the rest of it. Like, and so much of, I don't know who did it. I should have looked this up before. I know. There was a study where people were given the choice to sit in a room for, is it 10 or 15 minutes? There's nothing else in the room. There's a button. If you press the button, you're going to get an electric shock. And you know that. You know it's going to hurt. And you have a choice. You can just sit there and chill out for 10 minutes, or you press the button and you get an electric shock. And most people would be like, why would I do that? That's weird. And yet, something like 68% of men press the button and get electric shock. 25% of women, interestingly, you can read into that what you want. But what I find fascinating about that was the inability to just sit with yourself. Like, in this world now, there's so many distractions constantly. Like, I'm really aware of how I seem to always have my phone just as an extension of my arm. It's like, why am I doing that? And it just, if you can just sit and be with yourself, this sounds like what you're doing through your meditation, then you will be able to get a clarity of actually this approach is really not working for me. This is how it's costing me. This is what it's costing me. And then then I've got more impetus, I've got more drive to work out a different approach, as long as I don't want to sit there and feel like a victim and say, oh, that's just how it is. Or this is just, I can't, yeah, the mind can't be developed. Like, if I don't have the right mindset towards mental skills and neuroplasticity and so on. So yeah, I think so much of it actually boils down to being able to sit with yourself and your own mind and step back from it and notice what it's doing. And if people can't, if 68% of people would rather have an electric shock than just sit and chill with themselves, that's a big area for us to lean into.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're on this self-running automated treadmill of masochism towards knowing that we are placing our self-worth and our value on all of this idea of what success is. And we kind of know the answer. We
Yeah,
know the answer
yeah.
is that I should value myself. I shouldn't be just worried about the trophies and the tournaments and the prestigious clubs and the money and the success and the followers and the likes. Yet we just can't seem to run away from it like an addict. It's almost like success addiction, and thinking that the only way to get that success is through this one path, this one contraband of a method to do it. But there are others, and it's so hard to feel like if I've seen so many people go down this road and get success that I must go down that way, and that's the only way for me to get it.
It does feel like it's genuinely changing. I remember when I first started practicing, my first role as a psychologist within Team GB back in 2011 now, and I remember one of the technical coaches saying to me, "You can only talk to this athlete about their sport." And I was young psychologist back then, and I was like, "Ooh," I mean, I ignored it, but I was like, that," yeah, I didn't challenge him in the moment. I just thought, "F you, I'll do what I think's best for them. Thank you very much." Whereas now, the practitioner of now would be like, "No, let's sit with that coach and help them understand why it's not just about the sport." Because most often, actually, athletes, they know how to play the sport. It's all the other stuff that gets in the way. So there was going from that, where it was, like, really kind of, like, banned to talk about anything other than the technical side of the sport, to then you saw, like, Adam Peaty at the Paris Olympics, where, he had COVID just before one of his races, and I think came out with a silver medal, and the journalist kept saying to him, like, "Are you," like, "Oh, like, are you okay?" sort of thing. He was like, "I am so proud of myself." And they went back and forth about 3 or 4 times before the journalist understood that he was demonstrating a sense of fulfillment without a gold medal. And so it just having those narratives celebrated more, and giving, like, I think if you give people the space to think about, like, let's say the dream comes true and you win that tournament and you're standing on a podium with your teammates. What kind of person do you want next to you? What kind of relationship do you want with that person? You want to go out and celebrate that night. What kind of a night out do you want to have? Because if you haven't got any relationships because you haven't actually bothered to, like, be vulnerable with them and get to know them, how much fun is a night out with people you don't like? Like, it's like, even if it's like, make it quite simple and quite real, I think people will start to realize their own truth. Like you said, they know it. We know it already. We just don't give ourselves time to really, like, really take it on and then live in line with that. Hmm.
There was a really great interview with Ash Barty when she was world number one, and she was interviewed before a tournament, and the reporter asked her, saying, "How are you handling the expectations on your shoulder?" And she said, "What expectations?" And the reporter was kind of stunned, and he said, "That's your idea of success and the expectations. My expectations are to go out there, do the best I can, have fun, enjoy, be creative." All these listed off all these traits and characteristics that none of them were built around actually winning the trophy. And subsequently, she won. And I think it was so interesting just seeing in the moment this battle between two people going like, "No, these are the expectations you should have. This is the idea of success you should have," and someone being really strong who had clearly done the work to be able to go, "No, this is my version of
Same with
success."
Madison Keys. I think, was it the Australian Open and she won
Yeah,
that?
I was there. I was
Were
at
you? Oh,
AO.
wow, amazing. And I love the part of the interview, and she said, something along those lines of, "I've worked so hard to not need this, and as a result of not needing it, I finally freed myself of the burden that was stopping me playing to my potential." That it's just such a, it's such a paradox, isn't it?
Well, we had Jemima Montag on the podcast as well. I don't know if you saw Jemima's
No, but
post-race interview. So Jemima won bronze at Paris in race walking, and Jemima was interviewing her interview went viral, which just caught fire because she came off and it was Channel 9 in Australia that were just interviewing her. And they were explaining that, what does this mean to you? And she said essentially that I went from, there's this fine balance between wanting it and needing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I no longer felt the need to have it. I just wanted to win. There's nothing shameful in me wanting to go out there and wanting to be tough, be gritty, be
Dominate.
fierce,
Yeah.
dominate and put in a performance, but I don't need it. It doesn't define me. This isn't who I am, but I can choose to want it and not need it. And that's how it just started to catch fire.
I think everyone can get to that mindset if they put in the work.
So my question to you is, with someone who has spent a lot of time with elite athletes, both men and women, is there anything that you see nuanced and any differences that you see in how either men or women define their version of success?
Do you know what? I will caveat my thoughts to this. These are just my thoughts, right? So it's not something I've researched in any, with real integrity or anything like that. So it's just more like lived experience. I'm also going to sneeze. Sorry. I actually think, I don't know whether this would surprise you, so I almost want to know what you'd expect me to say. Maybe you could tell me that in a moment. But I actually think it is harder for the male athletes that I have been fortunate enough to work closely with, because my way of making sense of that is because from an earlier age, the definition of success and the way young boys are socialized is more competitive, is more dominating, is more beating others. Whereas for females, young girls, it's more around relationships and harmony. And almost like for the average, this is a terrible generalization, but for the average 14-year-old girl, happiness comes from having mates and being friends and being liked and so on. For the average, terrible stereotypes, the average 14-year-old male comes from being great at sport or being great at something. So it's more individually referenced, which is a lonelier place to be. The challenge with the counter with young girls then is that actually confidence is typically way lower than it should be. And we know that from the studies are out there that girls will judge their academic ability lower even though than young boys, even though they're actually achieving more. And we see that also with women then not applying for jobs until they're qualified or overqualified, whereas men will tend to apply for jobs that are just beyond their skill set. So confidence is the price they have to pay for that. But I have found it easier, like a quicker fix, for want of a better term, to help female athletes define success on their own terms than male athletes, because I think it's more entrenched. Those just reflections and opinions, not facts at all.
No, I would agree. That would have been my sort of bro theory to it as well. But again, probably more based on anecdotal experiences, not only a man, but as a male athlete. I think if you think of it very simply, and again, very overgeneralizing, but men are doing creatures and
Yeah.
women are feeling creatures.
Yeah.
So I think for men, you're very much early on in your life, again, especially in sport, to say if you do more, you will be more. And if you achieve more, you will be more. And I think for women, there's maybe a societal and maybe a sporting politics element to this, of where sport was and it wasn't sort of hasn't been in their sort of, the elite sport level hasn't been in their world for as many years. So, but the message definitely more around like you're valued on sort of the person you are, how you are. But for men, it's like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? And I think that stems into society, right? That's systemic in dating and things like that.
So the work I've done over the years with female sports teams is often around, people talk about task harmony versus social harmony of they would be more interested in what's the relationships like among the team and the squad, as opposed to actually what we really need to do is have robust conversations about what it's going to take to win. And how do we not take everything so personally in the pursuit of that and be willing to we've got to fall out in the pursuit of it. We've got to have like a bit of conflict. And then it's almost the opposite with the male teams is like, do you know what? Can you just for one moment stop obsessing about the win and actually think about the man that you're going to walk across that white line with and actually understand his journey and why he's here and what does he care about? Because the more you do that, the calmer you're going to be in the pursuit of your high performance. So it's relational on the men's side and task performance more focused on the female side. I've never thought about that. I think that definitely, if I were to, of course, every team is unique in its path, but that where is the work is different with different gender teams.
Yeah, and the confidence that you spoke about for women, I do believe that is the price they pay. I then think that there is a confidence price paid for men because your confidence is kind of built on what you do and what you achieve. But then if you fall below that, you never feel like you're enough and you're not confident enough to do that. And there's always someone else to be like. I kind of even see this in, you're seeing this version of bigorexia, right, in men, where men are going to the gym and getting big. I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard of this term.
no, go on. I can
So
imagine what it means. Yeah.
this is a bigorexia is essentially a form of body dysmorphia,
Yeah.
but it's that
Wow.
you don't feel that you're big enough.
Yeah.
And you just constantly feel like you need to be bigger in order to prove yourself. And it's literally a visual representation of kind of the success scale that you can think of, right? And I think of it like that because the people who are running towards that and getting big, there is a sense of confidence that they're trying to chase. And it's quite interesting because in the last year, I have put on size because I've trained differently. I've decided, and the confidence I've felt from changing that size is incredible. But I'm kind of happy with it now. Like I don't feel like I need more that I'm chasing unless I want some functional gain. But you'd see in the gym, you just see young men trying to chase size to feel more confident, to feel worthy enough. So there is a confidence cost there.
So, yeah, I actually randomly watched. In fact, I came off a session with an athlete a couple of nights ago. My husband was watching. Is it The Liver King? Do you know that? Is that the right phrase?
Yeah, I just watched that documentary last night.
I mean,
Wow.
it speaks to everything we're talking about, right? Of what it drives people. I don't know. Like
I
that's
felt like it was
extreme.
more built towards sort of charlatanism
Yeah,
and
fair.
lying
Yeah, yeah.
and creating an image of yourself that you don't really believe or are. I thought that documentary is just a showcase of how to lie to the public, and you don't really. I felt quite sad for him at the end
Yeah, same.
because I thought I don't really know who you are, and you're probably very broken. There's a lot of issues there, and
That bit you were just talking about of like that it's okay to enjoy the fact that you've made gains in that area. Like it's the same as like we're not saying it's bad to want to win. We're not saying it's bad to be euphoric when it's like it's both. So it's more about how you hold it. That I'm not going to over identify with this. I don't need it, but hey, it feels good, right? Like I'm human. I've got an ego, and my ego is not my worst enemy. He's my mate.
yeah, I feel it's for me personally, I feel it's a representation of the values and characteristics that I hold in order to attain that thing, which was very much built off. And I've spoken on the podcast about this before, that the way I viewed gaining success was that success was a byproduct of living values and characteristics of the person I wanted to be, aimed in the appropriate and logical and valued direction.
Powerful. Because you've done so much work in what you've just sort of dropped in there. Because when people talk about values, like well, my values or my ego's values are very different. And my ego's values would just be to win everything and to be able to help everyone. Whereas my personal values would be more around fulfillment and meaning and like yeah. So it's interesting to me when people. I think values can be such a huge gift in the way that you've just described it, but that's only because you've done the work to figure out what your real values are.
Well, yeah, talk to me about values. What role do they play in finding success?
That massive. And it's sorry to use a stereotype, but it is the compass, a massive, massive compass. Um, but if I haven't learned how the mind is and the primitive part that thinks without my permission, whether you use Steve Peters' chimp model or go with a more sort of mindfulness Buddhism like monkey mind type analogy, the All Blacks red brain, it doesn't matter what you use as long as you have an understanding that there are those different teams up there and that not all the thoughts I have are my own, then I can choose, okay, when I set my values, are these really my values or the ones I've inherited from early life experiences, misunderstandings where we started from, or because of what drivel I'm looking at on social media? So there's actually, sometimes I get nervous when people talk about values as like they think it's like a quick fix of like do a quick card sort online and figure it out. But then you sit with nothing. Like, my values are achievement, status, wealth. And it's like, really? So at the end of your life, this is what's really going to matter to you. It's like, no, those things are cool, but those are your chimp's values or your red brain's values or whatever it might be. So being able to separate the two is like the beginning of it. And then I'm such a believer in that sense that values is a choice and a skill. So in any moment I have a choice whether I tap into a value as a compass or whether I just go on a primitive reaction to something. And then I need to build the skill to do it, because often values, like one of my values is courage. It's not always easy. It's not easy to be courageous. And you don't have to be courageous all the time. But often if I'm with a coach or I'm with an athlete and they're telling me something that I think they're lying to themselves, it's often easier in that moment to just nod along and like, oh, it's the end of a good session. They feel really good about it, but I'm being of disservice to them. So we're constantly willing to piss them off, to challenge them if I think that, and find that courage. And in the moment, it is going to take some skill. So then I need some frameworks. I need to train myself in how to be direct, and I haven't always got it right. Sometimes athletes be like, Katie, it was too much. Like, dude, I was like, okay, but we're learning together. So I think values are a game changer if or when you define them wholeheartedly, like truly, authentically, and then you work on the skills to be able to choose the value more often. And then it's like, what a gift.
Have you found a way that is maybe practical in its approach for people to be able to find their values? For someone who perhaps is sitting there going, this is great, Katie, but I really don't know what my values are. I don't know how do I define them, what they look like? So how do people practically look to find their own values?
I think I haven't found the way. There is no way, is there? But I have methods that I use, and I constantly try and read the person that I'm sitting with, working with, to understand what method might be best for them. I normally ask them a series of questions. So things like, tell me about a day where you just loved it, it was brilliant, or a training session where it was just you absolutely loved it. What was going on in that session, like moments where you felt real joy or real connection with the moment. Tell me about someone that really pisses you off. What is it about that person? There'll be some clues in that. Tell me about when you finish your sport, what do you want people to say about the way you went about things? Not what you achieved, but the way you went about things. Look at your phone, look at the last 25 photographs and see if what's that telling you about the kinds of things you take photos of. So I think it's more about, there's like 10 or so questions that I might draw on, and then we would just get it all out on a piece of paper or a whiteboard or whatever it might be. And then just like a process of like mining, like try and find out what keeps coming out, what are the recurring themes. And I'm quite a fan of trying to get it down to just two or three. Some people are like, oh, I've got 8 values. I'm like, good luck with that. I'm sure they're all really great, but that's not going to be usable day to day. So just 2 or 3 max. So yeah, I haven't got like a neat and tidy, here's how. It's more like through a series of good conversations about things that matter to the individual. Another one that I find quite telling is like, what is it that, like, if someone were to misunderstand something about you that would really annoy you, what would that be? And again, in the way they answer that question, you can often find something they really care about. And then every now and again, of course, like there are some online card sort of things, you get the cards out and you make them into the piles of really important, very like not so important, and so on. I think that is quite illuminating if people are only just starting out with this kind of exercise. It's a good place to start. What about you? Like, how do you go about it?
So I similar. I actually kind of use 3 questions with people. I use, tell me a moment when you were most proud of yourself. What were you doing? Similar to what you were saying. Give me a moment in your life when things were really challenging, but you got through it. What energies and characteristics did you draw upon? And then very similar to you, like, what do you see that you like in people in the world, as well as what do you not like in people? What pisses you off? So a lot of what you said as well, I think there's a lot around the idea of avoiding what you don't want to be that can really tell you what you want to be. For me, and I think this is more aimed towards young people, because I think as you get older, you evolve, you have experiences, you have those. So when you're younger, you don't have those experiences. So you're kind of plucking out the air, like, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And it's massively existential questions, right? So one thing that I was drawn to was films, and I just watched inspirational films, and as cheesy as they could be, from your Rockies to Coach Carter's to Remember the Titans to all those sorts of things. But then I think some of the most pivotal ones for me were, I think, like, one that really sticks out in my mind was a film called Men of Honor, and it's Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro, and it's a true story. It's about a Navy master diver called Carl Brashear, who became one of the first. I think he was the first black Navy master diver. It's an incredible story about how, in the period of time that he was in, he was facing a lot of racial prejudice, and he got to that position. But the film is all built on this idea of honor, and I used to think of it and see whether it was military films. There's another film called Hacksaw Ridge, by the story of Desmond Doss, that I used to draw from these people and their stories and think of the values that they've got are values that I believe are honorable, and that are values that, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what world I'm in, whatever I'm trying to chase, that if I aim at these people I believe are honorable, that have done good things off the back of it, that good things could happen from that. So it was not, and none of those are in the world that I was trying to get into. It was based off, these people are honorable in character. They've done something. And at the end of the day, if I was doing those things, I'd be proud of myself. And then I think the last bit I would add is similar to what organizations get wrong, is that they create values based off just one word, and then no one really knows what that means. So I think that can be the same for you as an individual, is what if you come up with one word, like, what does it mean? And sometimes even just a phrase can be good. So one of my leading values in the world is leave people in a better place than how you found them. And that, for me, is just really actionable. You can drop that action into anything, whether it's this podcast, whether it's me going to the grocery store and smiling to the person at the counter rather than being disgruntled, and just trying to find a way to leave people in a better place than how you found them. Yes, I've got courage and bravery and hard work and things like that, and I can place that into whatever. But yeah, the more you can make it real and its own thing and actionable, I think the more valuable it is. But if you don't have that and you don't know from experience of what you want to be, I say look to other people.
Yeah. I feel like I need to be making notes during this podcast. So I've got movie recommendations, meditation speakers, the quote you shared at the beginning. Very cool.
So what have you got on the horizon? What for you are you excited about at the moment? What have you got coming up that you're enjoying the most?
You know what, I just find it all really exciting. I think, I'm still the lead psychologist with GB Men's Hockey, and have been since 2017. The guys are preparing for the Europeans this summer, which is like a really fun challenge for them to come back from being GB, Team GB Paris, to now they compete at the Euros as England. So it's an interesting identity piece there. And then I've got a really amazing just group of athletes that I work with in private practice, who are constantly challenging me and introducing me to new sports and different ways of trying to solve the puzzle of fulfillment and achievement. And my two kids, Louis, he's 1.5. He's now like running around, and he's fascinated he just loves kicking a ball around, and just being present with these little guys is really, really important. I have been increasingly it's been a number of years now, trying to work out how to bring sports psychology into schools more, as I'm such a believer that I just think this should be on the curriculum, like not sports psychology necessarily, but just understanding the mind, all the things we've been talking about and that you've been following through your own career as well. I just think it shouldn't be reserved for elite athletes that are part of a world-class program or a professional sport. I was so fortunate to meet and work with Marcus Rashford on his, he has written loads of books for kids, obviously a big passion area for him. And that really sort of tuned me into that as an area. So it's like trying to balance the kind of trying to improve the experience for kids at school, make it more meaningful, but also at the top end, the sharp end of performance. And with the rugby season coming to a conclusion soon, there's quite a bit of interest with a few of the athletes I work with there. So just continuing to learn how best to be of service to others and meet them where they are and help them move towards something meaningful.
I totally agree with that idea of bringing sports psychology into schools. Again, not necessarily just for the elite outcome that you can get from it, but I think PE is the most funded and undervalued part of our school system out there. I think it underpins absolutely everything. But not only that, what you learn through PE and exposure to sports sets you up for so much in life. And if you're talking about how you psychologically deal with sport, sport is only an exaggerated format of everyday events. And if you can learn how to deal with pressure, failure, winning, losing, progressing, also non-instant gratification, the fact that success doesn't come quickly, the more you will be able to deal with that in everyday life. And then you can add on the fact that there's physical benefits, the impact it would have on the health system if we had healthier kids that understood their bodies, their minds, their nutrition. The impact that could have could be incredible on society. But I think as well, from a mental health point of view, to get young kids to understand their minds while doing tough things, which sport is, doing something uncomfortable, to learn in that realm, you'll build the emotional resilience, the mental resilience. The mental health will come after that. I'm a huge believer in that.
100% with you on that.
It's actually something we didn't talk about, was this idea of the speed of success.
Mm.
Are you seeing that people want success faster now than they have previously?
It's hard, isn't it, to really get so caught up in that narrative that the entitlement of younger generation and so on. My gut feel is yes, but I feel like I'd need to spend more time thinking about it. Um, some of the athletes I worked with back in sort of 2011, 12, 13 were so kind of hardy and humble and like, you know, I remember one of the guys like didn't have the heating on. We used to have his session like under his duvet because he couldn't afford to put the heating on. But he just wasn't moaning about it. He was just like, no, I'm just grafting and I'm going to get to where I want to get to. I'm mindful now where mental health gets used sometimes as an excuse. Like, selection isn't good for my mental health. Like it could be you've chosen to be in elite sport, professional sport, where that is the territory. You choosing that. No one's forcing you. Let's talk about how you want to experience it and all the rest of it. So I think there's sort of there is a sense sometimes of it should happen, or even like if I work hard it should happen, but those two things aren't necessarily
No, not at all.
cause and effect. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I might be waffling a bit there. We need to think about it more. Is there something you're noticing, reflecting on?
I totally agree with what you've just said there about this idea that it should happen, this idea that success should happen if I put this work in, and life isn't built that way. I think, again, it's Steve Peters that puts in his book, you just have to accept that life isn't fair.
Not fair. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that for me is something that needs to be a real cornerstone of what you're doing. Like, I'm putting in this effort to increase my chances and hope that there's some form of success, but it's not guaranteed, especially in sport. It's not binary. You could have the best game you've ever played, best performance you've ever played, and you still lose, or you come off second best. And I think of the Chris Eubank Conor Benn fight, the fact that Conor Benn lost that fight, but kind of can leave feeling like he won given the effort that he put in. I think that was a really great example of that. But yeah, society is pushing people down this idea of I want to get success faster, and if I'm not having it now, then why will it come in the future? And for me, I work with a lot of kids in the private school section, and I think that is a really dangerous environment for them because they place so much ownership on performance at school level that I see the kids and have to work and try to unpick it, with the kids valuing success so much early on that if I don't have success now as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, then I'm not going to make it as a professional. And I'm like, no, look at all of the stories and paths of people that have made it in their 18, 19, 20 and into their low 20s that have come out of nowhere. But do you want to be known as a great performer now where no one really kind of knows who you are, or it doesn't really ultimately have value in the big goal that you're trying to set for yourself? Do you want to be lifting a trophy at school or lifting the trophy at Wimbledon?
Yeah. Yeah. And either way, what do you want to experience along the way? Like what's the journey? What's going to make that journey really worthwhile for you, whether you get there or not? Yeah, it is something we need to probably find newer ways to reinforce, because every time they log on to Instagram or TikTok, it's giving them the opposite message. how to claim back your mind and how to think in a way that is going to work for you. I think is harder for this generation.
Look, Katie, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome to have you. You've been recommended by many of the early previous athletes that have come onto the show. Your name keeps cropping up. I'm so glad we did get to carve out the time for you to come on. So I'm so appreciative for you coming on. Where's the best place for people to follow along with you, what you're doing? Where should we send them?
I don't have a hugely committed social media presence. My Instagram's kind of a bit personal, but it's Katie_discovery. I try to, when I get some form of discipline, to share professional stuff more on the Prime Clinic, which is where I work with my husband Remy, who's an amazing physiotherapist and sports rehab specialist. So I think that's the Prime_clinic. But yeah, people are so welcome to come and hang out and share thoughts and ideas, share their challenges, their successes. I really love learning from others along that space as well as sharing things that might help. So yeah, come and hang out.
I love what you're doing. I love how you go about it.
Mm.
I've loved this conversation. Everybody, Katie Mobed, thank you.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed that episode with Katie, then you will definitely enjoy my conversation with Patrick Goodrow. All you have to do is click this link right here.